Right. I will need to let people in as I go along, I've realized also, so excuse me if I get interrupted. So thank you for joining today. This is episode 2 of In the Loop. We will be discussing the EU electricity market today and the business models. And my name is Sarah Wilkin. I think I will know many of you on the call today, but hopefully we'll also have some new people joining as well. Today, joining me is also Fayaz from SAF Investor, and Robin will be joining us independently, but also working at Vattenfall. So what is In the Loop? A few people have now been asking me. We've posted online, we've been inviting different people to our new event. Well, not a new series actually. So what people have been kind of wondering with Fly Green Alliance is, of course, our name indicates that we are working with aviation. As our work has expanded beyond aviation, we're also started to work in biodiesels, e-fuels, and also nuclear. So it is and we're also working across different sectors with our net zero focus, but it is expanding and widening as we go along. So this is why we've also created In the Loop. It's to bring more into our group, more into our loop, into our circle, and so that we can share our work with more groups. And really, it is kind of the spirit and the focus of FGA and In the Loop is about discovery. It's always been about tech and science since the start. We have also been, what I also came to realize my own personal career and way has been campaigning for innovation and tech that I thought I liked, made sense, good for society, and now it is, of course, with a net zero focus as well. So we've been representing at the UN and different groups. So this is really what we want to do within Loop, is to bring all of this to our group as well, and being the messenger. So I also for something, maybe nearly 50 events I've spoken at in the last few years now. So it really has become embedded as part of Fly Green Alliance's work, and In the Loop's work is to really communicate tech and science to a wider group, and also to be that conduit and to communicate it in an easy to understand way. So that's a really big focus. And yesterday I had a really interesting meeting with a group that is working as creatives, quite often with San Francisco startups and VCs, and I was explaining what In the Loop and our work was, and they were saying they completely understood the focus. They understand communication is really important for also not only it's funding as well as communicating your story and message. So that's definitely what we want to do, and have people to be kind of supporting us, and us to do that on their behalf as well. So that was some good acknowledgement yesterday. So of course, the start of In the Loop has been from Fly Green Alliance, and I am the founder of Fly Green Alliance. And we have been we developed in the first place from a Booking.com grant with the University of Amsterdam, and that was 2018. So bringing sustainable aviation fuel to the attention of Booking.com, and then a lot of other groups since then. So with Fly Green Alliance, that's all good. With Fly Green Alliance, we have created a net zero declaration, so that everybody that knows us can see the types of work that we are working towards. It is industry level work, and it's really to so people can see our focus and our action points. We've created different reports, and this one on the right we will share with you. It's a 44-page report with a lot of different insights on net zero, but also our views and input along the way. So we will send that out in the follow-up. And we have created a documentary in the last year discussing the carbon budgets and why we are really focusing on our net zero work. So if you would like to watch that, you can use the QR code or Google the golden bullet. So this is this is kind of why we're coming together. Also, we've had some good comments, so I think we should talk about them. Awesome idea, this series. We had a group say to us, so I think it's important to also get the feedback. We're creating a new series which we're doing with this episode too. These are our members so far. So as you can see, they are varied from airlines, data, nuclear sector, biodiesels, offsets. So it's a varied group, as I mentioned. In the loop is so that we can bring more groups together to exchange cross-sector, to support each other with information, and then we will build our membership and community from there. But all of these groups have a focus of innovation and net zero. So and what we are doing now is getting to know our groups better, so we know exactly what their focuses are. And it is, of course, to build trust. As soon as you build trust, you begin to work together, and you begin to project build and to make progress. So that is also a really important aim of ours, is to build trust with a cooperative approach. So we do want this series to be for everybody, and so we have made it a very low cost so that groups can join, even if, as we've seen, that budgets are becoming quite constrained lately, but we want to keep moving this work forward, so we're making it as accessible as possible. And what we do want to do is information share, facilitate and coordinate. So this week is the World Sustainable Aviation Fuel Forum. So I will speak on Thursday. I will also moderate a panel, and we will be discussing, it is a sustainable aviation fuel conference, so there'll be lots of different groups there from the aviation sector. In April, we'll also, I will present also at a Fast Markets event in conference in Rotterdam. And this, if you also want to go to this conference, there is a 15% discount through FGA, and you can attend in April through us, but also get in touch with the team. And Fayaz will speak later, but SAF Investor will also have their conference in May and focus on some of these topics too. And then I'm just going to, so I want to leave as much time as possible today so that Robin and Fayaz can speak. So I'm going to hand it over to Fayaz so that he can give us some updates now on the sustainable aviation fuel market.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Sarah. Afternoon and evening to everyone. I see a few faces from South Asia. So evening to those, and afternoon to everybody else from Europe and UK. So yeah, basically, I'm going to mention a bit about SAF, what is happening in SAF right now, and how will the Trump administration and mandates affect the SAF market, but also broad-based updates from the sustainable aviation fuel landscape and what companies are doing. So in the previous session, we discussed how Trump administration has thrown a spanner into works for the credits that were earlier being given out to SAF producers. But since then, there has been a very big development, which is basically the Department of Energy has approved a loan for its subsidiary, approved a loan for Montana Renewables, with the first tranche of 782 million expected to be dispersed soon. This is a major development from a SAF in US point of view, because it gives kind of some degree of certainty as to whether previous commitments that were made under Biden administration will be honored or not under Trump. This is kind of a good example of that. So this also sets a precedent, as in we can probably expect all of the previous announcements for funding to go through during Trump administration, which is, I would say, a very big development for SAP, because a lot of projects have been cancelled in the last 1 or 2 weeks. Only today, I think Air Company canceled their project for World Energy. They were developing a hydrogen pipeline network to kind of facilitate World Energy's SAF plant in California, but they pulled out of that. And There may be internal reasons because there was a lot going on internally in the company, but the reason that they cited was policy uncertainty, also some of the incentives that were being given out for hydrogen under Trump administration. So, but there is also a positive. So, new rise renewables in I think Revo, Nevada also began sustainable aviation fuel production in this month, and they also signed a multi-million gallon contract with a third party to facilitate their SAF produce, and they'll be selling the SAF produce to that company. So, which is a very good news from on that front. So, US is beginning to look like some projects are going, some projects are being paused, some are being cancelled outright. So it looks, so I mean, it kind of aligns with the uncertainty that usually follows Trump, as we have seen. So I think time will tell how things are going to turn out. But at least for the year or so, we expect the policy landscape to remain a bit uncertain as to what the best way forward is. Um, but that's only, I would say, on a federal level. On a state level, I still see a lot of projects, a lot of incentives being given out and being kept in place. And also, we could probably expect a few mandates from us, from few US states here and there. So that would be something which is really interesting and worth looking into in the coming 6 to 9 months. Other than that, from a regional and global perspective, I think ICAO also announced a FinVest hub. Basically, they have been trying to launch this for the last 6 to 9 months, and they finally launched it. I think the Finvest Hub, essentially wants to connect project developers to financiers, investors, so that these projects can get access to as much funds as possible, and maybe they can find potential partners through this Finvest Hub. And the hub will also work on prioritizing support to developing countries, which is also very, very important because there have been a lot of projects in the US, EU, but there have been relatively less in Asia Pacific or say broader rest of the world. So this should also kind of help create that stage where project developers from developing countries can kind of come to and find potential partners as well. This kind of gives me a segue into Indonesia. Indonesia is also deciding to put a 3% SAF mandate, which is very interesting because Indonesia is one of the leading, I would say, palm oil producers or exporters in the world. So them setting a mandate means they're probably going to invest in domestic capacity, which is always a good sign. And it is, but the only caveat is that it is primarily going to be in the HEFA pathway, which is going to have implications for feedstock availability for projects which are outside of this region. So that will be interesting to see. They also have increased the biodiesel mandate as well. Um, Basically, they want to curtail the limitation or curtail their dependence on imports of fuel and kind of make sure the domestic base is developed enough to ensure that all of these supplies are kind of making a way towards future where all of the fuel supplied is domestic. So that's the goal, which is very interesting. It's very always interesting to see countries from the developing world kind of setting the stage for SAF mandates because a lot of feedstock is coming from there. So having those mandates within those countries would also ensure that a production base in those countries is also established and all of that feedstock is not exported to say Europe or NA. Um, Finally, the I think the biggest news that came out was the project Sky Power. It's a coalition of ESAF and other aviation stakeholders who have called upon the European Union to ensure that they intervene, and they basically have listed down 5 points that they want the European Union to kind of look into to ensure that ESAF projects achieve the financial investment decision because it has been a big challenge. A, to secure the renewable energy or energy that is needed to produce ESAF, but also find investors who are willing to put money into this technology, which has a relatively lower technological readiness level compared to, say, other pathways like HEFA or alcohol to jet. So it's very important. So they've mentioned 5 points. The first one is that they want EU to make ESAF a strategic priority in the Clean Industrial Deal and Sustainable Transport Investment Plan. Basically enshrine ESAF as a fuel into their priority and make sure that it receives all of the benefits and policy support that it needs to scale. The second point is recycle ETS revenues to capitalize a market intermediary. Basically, they want the emission trading system, the revenues that they earn from emission trading system to kind of go back into supporting these new industry, but also facilitate or maybe incentivize production of ESAF. Um, I think the final most important point was to mitigate project on project risk with government's backstop mechanism. Uh, any government support can definitely be pivotal to these projects to either make them or break them. So it remains to be seen what kind of announcement do European Union make after this. But there were a few very interesting facts that were mentioned by Project Sky Power in their press release. It said that despite 30 announced projects, no ESAF project or no facility has so far reached final investment decision. This is in the context that EU already has an ESAF mandate, which is not started yet, but they have. So investors not supporting ESAF projects is a big deal and a big challenge for them, and it remains to be seen what kind of support the European Union policymakers can come up with to make sure that these projects reach the FID that they need in order to begin production by the time the sub-mandate of ESAF kicks in. So it's really interesting to see if maybe other sources of renewable energy, say nuclear, could also play a role. What only remains to be seen how this kind of shapes up into the future. I'm happy to answer any questions if you guys have any with regards to the topic we discussed or broader SAF industry.
Thanks,
Thank
Fayez. Okay, and just to give everybody some context that might not be working in sustainable aviation fuel, I've been asking Fayez to join us because we are Fly Green Alliance and this is in the loop. As I mentioned before, what we are doing is working across different fuels and sectors, but what we want to do and this is also why we've invited Robin to speak today, is that all of our sectors are very interconnected. What I'm going to show you also later after Robin has presented is a kind of hybrid approach. And as Fayez mentioned, some of what Fayez mentioned might be quite technical to some people. It might be not on your radar, but what it is signaling for any kind of net zero project still pushing ahead, despite politics, despite investment, recession. What we are looking for is also positive signals and pieces of information and insights that help everybody do their work better, but also keep optimistic in quite tricky times. So we're providing this kind of mix of information today and in every episode of In the Loop to kind of give this bigger context. And I'll go into this a bit more later, but I just wanted to kind of explain. But yeah, if anybody's got any questions for Fayez specifically, then let us know in the chat. Otherwise, we can also take questions at the end. I think we've got a question. Yeah, would you like to go ask?
Yeah. Thanks, Fayez. I have a question about, you mentioned that investors are still not very much willing to invest into SAF. So maybe can you expand a bit more on that topic? Like, why is it? Is it because the technology is not so much expanding or not yet ready, or is it more about the profitability of the overall manufacturing and maybe the distribution side?
Thank you, Aditya, for the question. So basically, there are multiple pathways to produce SAF. You might be aware, HEFA and alcohol to jet, and then comes ESAF. ESAF is a relatively newer pathway, and it is significantly more expensive. It all boils down to how much of a gap there is between, say, ESAF and conventional jet fuel. If the gap is way too high, then it becomes a problem to sell it. I mean, from a basic economics point of view, if you can buy something for, say, 10 and the alternate is for 1,000, you'd obviously buy the 10. Even if you know there are lots of environmental benefits, the gap has to be relatively smaller for that to make sense. So that's why ESAF is not scaling to a level where it should, especially given the sub-mandate that we have in the EU and also in the UK. I would say that's the primary reason why, but also from a technological readiness level, there's a lot of challenges to secure that renewable energy in order to produce ESAF. For you to have that level of renewable energy where you can produce this at scale is a big challenge, especially in the EU as well. So these are a few things that are kind of making it very tough for project developers to attract money, but also investors to kind of achieve those returns that they need to commit long term.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll go into this more actually, because that is Robin will let us know more about his work within the EU electricity market, and then we'll discuss towards the end some of the topics that we are also, signaling topics, what information for investors that we see towards the end. So yeah, please, welcome Robin. As I mentioned, Robin is currently at Vattenfall and has been at Accenture, an Accenture consultant in the past. He's got some good insights for us, and so I'll hand over to Robin now. Thank you, Fayaz, and thanks for the question.
All right. I just take over the control from here on, if that's fine for you, Sarah. All right. So yeah, thanks for the nice introduction of myself. I think I cannot add so much to that anymore. Yes, I'm working now since 8 years in the electricity market within the European Union. I'm mostly focused on the German, the Dutch, the Danish, and a bit of the France market, so a bit more on the western part. But of course, all of the regulations that I will also discuss, then also applying for the whole European Union, but also then, so they are applying for all of the countries. And that is already one of the first disclaimer I want to make before we jump in and framing a bit what I will talk about today. Yes, I will talk about the European Union energy market, which then, of course, it's exclusively within the European Union and the member states. And also the laws, directions, and regulations I will touch and show today. They are the European Union framework, and each member state might have a different implementation of the same law. So when I discuss something or when I showcase something, and you might think, hey, that's different in my country, and yeah, that's perfectly the plan that it's being like that. So keep that in mind. And also I will go within the presentation through some participation models, how you as a non-energy company can participate at the energy market. And also that's highly depending on the implementation of the European Union framework and how it's being managed and what is actually possible grid-based in your country. So you keep it also in mind that might not everything is available or yet possible in your country. All right, so let's jump in and have a short overview about a high-level energy grid within the European Union and how this is being separated and being managed. So we have 4 main roles within the energy market, and they are well defined with some regulations. I will go through that in a second. There can be even more. Just thinking about the German market, I can think about 10 more roles, but they just add more distinguished and detailed roles, and they could be summarized in one of the other roles we are seeing here. So let's start from the right part, from the left part, the producing companies or the producing power plants. There is no exact number of how many power plants there are in the European Union, because it's also not well defined and standardized what is a power plant. For example, in Germany, also having 2 or 3 solar panels on the roof puts you on the list of power plants. So there is no defined threshold of what is actually a power plant. Therefore, the number is a bit blurry, but most sources I found are like 9,000 power plants within the European Union, including nuclear power plants, fossil power plants running on gas, coal, brown coal, but also then a lot of renewables, solar, wind, hydro energy. So yeah, there's a big mix of that. So the producing part just produces energy. That's their main role, and providing stability to the grids. And order so that you receive the energy at your home, you also need to have a transmission system operator. Also, during the presentation, I will call it a grid operator sometimes. And the transmission system operator operates the long-distance grid, really going from the north of a country to the south, really making sure the energy is well distributed from the power plant to the local consumers. That's mostly the big poles, so the big power lines you can see going through your country. And once the big power lines receives the border of your city that you're living in, it's going into a transformation station. And then from there on, the so-called distribution system operator takes over, which is then the grid operator for your local network. So make sure that all of your houses in the city have electricity, the light poles, the public transport, whatever you think of in the city. The main difference between the transmission grid and the distribution grid is just simply the voltage and the amount of energy being in the grid. So because you as a simple household, you cannot manage the energy that's coming from the transmission grid. So it must be transformed, it must be properly end up in your apartment or in your house. So in order that you actually receive energy and that you're being considered within the grid, you need to make a contract with an energy supplier. That can be any kind of energy company, but also new startups become an energy supplier. And they are just an entity that makes a contract with you. So you make a contract agreement about, let's think about your household. So let's assume you will consume 3,500 kilowatt hours throughout the year. Then the supplier makes a purchase agreement with a producing company saying, I have this demand for the next year. Can you produce that energy for me? And then they make an agreement. And then also the supplier contacts the system, the distribution system operator saying, I have a new customer in your grid area. I have a purchase agreement for that energy. I have it all, it's covered. Then the distribution system operator agrees to that as well, knowing that this new grid. And then also the distribution system operator contacts the transmission system operator to make sure the energy is being transmitted from the power plant to the local grid, and then therefore to your household. For all of that, the producer, the transmission, and the distribution system operator charges a fee to the supplier, which is then also ending up in your energy bill that you receive, probably mostly yearly. And you can see a position grid fee or however it's called, but that is being, with the part that you consumed, is being charged on your monthly energy invoice. All right, that's just a little excursus on explanation on how the energy grid works. Again, it can be different in each country. It can be can look a bit different, but on the EU framework, this is the design of an energy market, or of the energy grid. How did we end up here, actually? So there's a lot of EU regulations and a constant flow of new regulations coming that ensures that the energy market is a competitive and open market, but also has sustainability goals that always being considered. And you can mostly put the regulations in three buckets, which is then the grid regulation, making sure that the grid operator, even if it's the transmission or the distribution grid, are speaking the same language. So there's a standardized communication needed in order to manage all of the communication I just mentioned. But also keeping the same technical standards so that every EU member country that is not on the technical standard yet, think about the new members from the last decades, they still need to develop the grid. They need to bring it to the technical standard that is being expected. But also a lot of consumer rights, so making sure everybody can participate, everybody is treated fairly on the energy market, and you have a lot of transparency, that you can see the prices, that you can see the energy mix and everything. And also a lot of sustainability goals, making sure we're constantly working towards renewables, we're constantly working towards the net zero, what is described within the European climate law. And yeah, they all have a purpose, and they're all mostly spanning across multiple sectors and multiple areas. So, for example, let's take the RED III, the Renewable Energy Directive, and that's the third iteration of it. It says at the one time we have a renewable energy target by 2030 and within the European Union, we need to achieve 42.5% of renewables. That's the overall goal, but also within that a ramp up so that every year you need to increase your mix by 1 point whatever percent, and then it's increasing towards the 42.5%. But at the same time, it's also providing consumer rights in a way of more participation, more transparency, so that those packages always contain a lot of interesting stuff. Just a few important things to mention. Yeah, I mentioned the RED 3. It's already an iteration from the RED 2. I think the RED 2 had like 33% by 2030, and then in 2023 it was updated to 42.5%, so even a bit more ambitious. Yeah, the European climate law being net zero in 2050, but also being net 55% in 2030. So also then intermediate steps that we're not just looking at a big target in the horizon, but having steps for that. The electricity market regulation, as I said, is providing more transparency for customers. You get all of the detailed data. You can see the spot price, what is like at the moment, the price for energy in your region. And then also, yeah, the electricity market reform, then defining more standardized way on how we do energy supply within a country, but also cross-border trades from the energy grid provider, so that if the surplus is in one country, then another country can buy that energy. So that is being more standardized, being more simplified. All right, so having said that, there's still a few issues with the energy grid, and most importantly, the energy grid is kind of a bottleneck for the energy transition. Don't get me wrong, there are more issues for the energy transition. It's political power, public acceptance, and so on. But looking from a grid perspective, that is really one of the biggest bottleneck we have right now. So let's, for example, take grid congestions and infrastructure limitations. One example tangible example I can give is in Germany. Germany has invested quite big in offshore wind parks in the North Sea, and there's a lot of energy available. However, the grid is not able to transmit the energy towards the industry-heavy south. So think about the southern, the Stuttgart area in Germany, where a lot of car manufacturers are sitting, where a lot of suppliers are sitting. That is energy-heavy industry. And because the grid cannot transmit the full energy from the when it's available, they still need to fire up fossil power plants in the south in order to make sure the industry companies still have enough energy, even though the amount of energy is available in renewables at the north, but it's not being transmitted to the south. Another issue we see with the digitalization and more connectivity within the grid is, of course, cybersecurity. I am not fully sure about the year, but I remember in the last few years there was a big problem, for example, in Venezuela, where when some hacker took over some power plants and they messed around, and then the country was in a blackout for a couple of days. I think similar stuff happened in the Ukraine in 2015 when some hackers took over the energy supply and how the grid is working, and also a lot of imbalance, a lot of uncertainty was then within the energy grid. So that is, of course, a risk becoming a more digitalized grid, but also the grid resilience itself against the climate change. And just like think about a big storm, a catastrophe, and some of the power lines are being kicked over. It takes a long time to rebuild that, and the backup capacity is not that big in order to achieve that. But also changes in temperature. I know it's a more extreme example, but if you have a look at the energy grid, for example, I think it was in Texas, there was a few years ago a big issue with a heat wave, and then the energy grid wasn't able to support that anymore. It was also breaking down in a bit. But also what we see is an electrification and just a growing demand in the energy. So EV cars, heating pumps, in industry itself is changing from gas as a power to electricity. In general, there's a higher demand in energy that we need to put through the limitation of the grid. And as I mentioned with the first example, then that makes it hard to integrate the fluctuating renewable energy. Wind is blowing when wind is blowing, sun is shining when the sun is shining. So we can just use the energy or store it, But that is providing an issue for the grid in case of stability, because if the wind is blowing and you want to use that energy, you need to ramp down fossil or other power plants again. But then the wind is stopping and then you need to ramp up again. So there's quite a complexity in managing and orchestrating the energy supply. It's stable. It's not a risk in the European Union, but still it makes it hard to implement the renewables energy, and there's still a big amount of waste. I think one number I know for sure is last year there was 10% of all solar energy in the Netherlands was wasted because there was no use and the grid wasn't able to transmit it where it needs to be consumed. All right, so that is also putting some of the businesses in the European Union or exposed it to some risk. First of all, the operational risk. I just said that the fluctuating energy supply is then also changing or increasing your energy price that you have to pay. Fossil energy is more expensive than renewable energy in most cases. So if you live in the example that I just mentioned in the industry-heavy south in Germany, you mostly only get fossil energy. So therefore, you have to pay more. Or in general, the fluctuating price can create an issue and can eat up your profit margin while you're producing something, if it's an energy-heavy industry. But also the unreliable power supply can expose you to technical issues if you have very sensitive infrastructure, very sensitive machines or sensory that is requiring a stable energy supply. And if the grid is fluctuating too much and the frequency is not in balance anymore, that can be a damage for your operation. Again, if you have this very sensitive infrastructure at your company. Another thing is the economical risks that we then also see. Price volatility makes it hard to plan long term. The energy prices are increasing every year because we want to push more renewables into the market, and the growth pain is costing something. But it makes it hard for you to plan long term and to make then also decisions on investment for long term. And also seeing that on a geographical perspective, if you're competing in an energy-heavy industry with competitors from other countries where the government is subsidizing the energy price a lot, you might have a competitive disadvantage in that area. And also, if you're really into the sustainability topic and you really want to make it as an asset for your company, or you just like have the mission that you want to be in 100% renewables, it is quite hard to really ensure that, because again, the example that I gave in Germany, you don't have the control and you cannot ensure that you receive 100% renewable. You can just like by making a choice of a supply contract that you want to have green energy, that just ensures that the capacity is there for green energy, but you don't receive 100% green energy. If the coal plant next door is firing up, you receive that energy quite surely. All right. I also need to forget always to click next slide. But there's a solution by the European Union, or there's at least an idea from the European Union to mitigate those risks and make sure that you can participate at the energy market and have some advantages. So that's the Clean Energy for All Europeans package that was introduced in 2019. It's quite of a big package and it covers a lot of things, way too much for this presentation to cover. But what it also ensures is a strong participation by consumers and prosumers into the energy market. So if you have a look 10 years ago, it was mostly that energy companies playing on the energy market because they have the expertise, they have made the investment, they have the history of being an energy company. But as a non-energy company, the only thing you could do is like put solar panels onto your roof and produce some of your own energy. Maybe you could feed it in, but there was a limitation on how much you can participate. And with that package, a few models for participation were introduced into the energy market and make sure that you as a consumer or as a prosumer can participate and have a stronger involvement into the energy supply for yourself, but also for the overall grid around you. And within the presentation now, I will go through some of the participation models. Again, that's I try to keep it as generic as possible because it can have different implementation within your local country in the European Union. Just to keep that in mind again, that this is the generic framework and it can look a bit different on where you're living. All right, let's start with the flexible demand response program. That's somehow the baseline for all of the other models. You always need to think about a flexible demand response program. And quite easily saying this means that you shift your electricity demand, so your consumption, you shift it towards a time where it's more beneficial for you regarding the price, regarding availability of renewables, or in general, just the grid stability. So if you have a look at the graph on the right-hand side, that's the electricity price, the hourly electricity price from Germany from yesterday. And just have a look, for example, at the drop from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. That's roughly from 13 cents going down to 4 cents, sorry. And that's a significant drop in cost. And if you could shift your energy demand and whatever it is by that 2 hours, you could save a lot of money just by shifting your demand or reducing it at 8 a.m. and ramping it slowly up towards 10 and 11 a.m. So there's a benefit of shifting the demand and avoiding the high peak hours and consuming the energy at the low peak hours or at the low times. Also, what it mostly means, if the energy price is low, that means there's a high availability of renewable energy. And at the peak hours where everybody goes to work, making breakfast, cooking, whatever, there is the demand. The power plants for fossil also need to ramp up to cover the demand, and then you have a bigger mix of fossil and renewable energy. So also keep that in mind. So who benefits from models like that? In general speaking, manufacturing companies that can shift some of the loads. There are a few examples with cold storage and refrigeration, so that you pre-refrigerate your warehouse with an operational window without destroying the goods in the warehouse, but you cool it down more as you need to, just to not cool it as much during the peak hours, and then cool it again in the time where the price is low. So you avoid a bit of the high peak hours while cooling. Same goes for air conditioning or heating system in general. You can cool down the building a bit more during a low price time, so it stays cool during the high peak time and you don't need to put so much energy into it. Also pumps and compressors that needs to pump and compress regularly, frequently, they can also being adjusted towards shifting the demand at a time where the price is lower. Of course, there are challenges. The initial investment for equipment and software, some of the flexibility for businesses is also then a challenge. So you need to really think, can you participate? Can you shift your demand? Or is it more important to serve the customer whenever you need it, or to have the full flexibility? That's a challenge you need to figure out. But then it comes with benefits of lower energy costs. So because you avoid the high peaks and only consume most of your energy at the low peaks, you save a lot of energy. You have a great sustainability impact because you consume more of the available renewable energy, and you provide some grid resilience and some support to stabilize the grid. There are already successful implementation. Next Kraftwerk in Germany, you will see the name a couple of times. It's a very big player. Flexitricity in the UK, and NILX is a quite interesting example where exactly supermarkets are doing the method with refrigerating, and they cool down their stores when the price is low, and they avoid cooling so much when the price is high. All right, so keep the flexible demand response in mind, and now add some more of your infrastructure. And in that case, your electrical vehicles. Again, this is becoming a bit more specific, and it's maybe not suitable for all companies, but if you have a fleet of EVs sitting around, maybe during the office time, you have like company cars being EVs, or you are a delivery company that is operating on EVs, and they are, at some time of the day, they just sit around. And the EV charging solution is, the goal is that you provide the capacity of the batteries as a battery storage towards the grid. So you make an agreement with the transmission system operator, or in some countries with the distribution system operator, and implementing equipment and software so that the grid operator can control the charging sessions of your cars. That can be one directional, so that you just let the grid operator steer the charging session, but you still just charge, and maybe sometimes a bit slower, sometimes a bit faster based on the price signals. Or you can make it bi-directional, so that also energy can be taken away from the battery of the cars if needed. Who benefits from that? Yeah, I said offices, delivery companies. There are some municipalities that are working with that model. They have like police cars, just social worker cars, anything you can think of. They just have a huge fleet of cars. Also, you can think about industrial companies with EV equipment like forklifts or other machineries that are driving around that maybe just sit at night or when it's not so much produced. One challenge that you really need to consider here is the battery degradation risk. Of course, you put your battery through more cycles, which can damage the battery or changes a bit in the way how you want to work with the battery. And also there it becomes a bit more, you will have more complexity from the regulatory side, because then you're really part of the big energy grid. You provide batteries, so there you need to do some more communication. But there are also companies then to help you with. The benefits of that, of course, is you get more revenue or new revenue streams. You get compensated for providing your assets into the grid. You improve your fleet utilization. So because you also use your cars or your fleet during times where you don't operate, where you don't deliver, where you don't drive it, you can still make money with it. And yeah, then you have a sustainability impact, and also again you provide grid resilience. And also there we have successful implementation. Nissan is a big player in the UK. In Denmark, I saw a couple of examples of the municipalities being part of that program. And also in France, they have implemented together with the government supplier that the offices are having the possibility to put in their company cars into a vehicle-to-grid solution. Let's take that one step further and think about not just adding your cars, but also all of the other stuff you have as a company. So let's think about solar panels on a roof. Maybe you have a backup battery or backup energy generation that is running on any fuel. And then also let's throw in the so-called industrial load. I just mentioned it with refrigerating, with heating, producing whatever you can shift, or pumping. That's being considered as industrial load. And by that, or by doing that, you will be seen as a virtual power plant by the grid. So it's not only just a battery, but because you also then produce energy and feed in energy in a bigger amount to the grid, you will be seen as a so-called virtual power plant by the grid operator. Again, who benefits? Like who can join it? Yeah, as I said, companies with solar panels, battery storage, any kind of industrial loads and EV fleets. Also the backup generation. You have the similar challenges as before. Of course, you need to invest in some equipment. You need to adjust your operational processes, because you need to offer flexibility to the grid in order to participate there. So that has some impact on your operations that you need to consider. And also, yeah, you need to do some communication within the market. You need to be regulatory compliant with that. But then again, the big benefits, also new revenue streams. And of course, by providing more assets, more infrastructure, the revenue streams grow up. Again, you have lower energy costs because you have you use it in the most optimized way, and also you get more and more access to detailed information and data about the grid. So you see the same thing as a power plant sees, and you act on the same signals as a big power plant does. So you have more insights about the situation of the grid. Tesla is doing that already with their big plants in Europe, in Germany and in the UK. Statkraft is one of the biggest player at the moment, providing virtual power plant in Germany and Norway. So they aggregate a few companies and municipalities to join their virtual power plant network. And also Next Kraftwerk, as I said, is also a big player on that market to aggregate different virtual power plants. Last but not least, it's some decentralized energy communities. So that means that if you think about the very first picture I've shown, that you're very far away from the production of the energy, that can change with a decentralized energy community, so that you directly make sure you get your energy by your own assets. So let's assume you work in a business park, you have your office in your business park, and you group up with all the other offices and businesses and that, and then you buy solar panels, you buy other renewable energy sources only for your supply. So that can be directly connected to you, like it's decentralized, so the energy does not go through the grid, but it goes directly to you, and you can trade within your community. You manage the energy supply within your community. And then any surplus that you have from that, you can sell to the grid. But the energy is not produced at the far side of the country and being transmitted, and you need to pay all of the grid fees to really make sure you take care of your own energy supply. Who can participate? Everyone, actually. And it's also there, you don't need to be on the producing side. You can only be on the consuming side, because that also helps the other members of the energy community to make the business case for the investment of the infrastructure. If you just say, yes, I guarantee you a certain consumption, that really helps. Of course, that comes with regulatory complexity, like all of the topics regarding the electricity market. And yeah, the investment gets bigger here because you really need to invest in large infrastructure. But it also comes with a lot of benefits. Again, you reduce your energy cost by quite a lot. And because this is a quite supported model by the European Union, you might even get incentives by the European Union. They subsidize it in a bit that it's feasible for you, or the business case makes sense for you. Yeah, you enhance your integration of renewables energy, and you act, or you engage with your community itself, and create a broader network that is going beyond just the energy consumption. Also, there we have successful implementation. I see in Germany quite a few implementations where newly developed residential areas are becoming energy communities. So the buildings are being developed in a way that they are sustainable, that they have solar panels on the roof is in the right direction. So newly residential areas are being developed in the focus of being an energy community or being self-sufficient. But also, yeah, if you're already being in an existing area, you can still work with the local grid operator to make sure you can manage your energy decentralized. All right, so what's next? What's still happening in the European Union? So that's the direction of the European Union, going towards the participation of everybody in the energy market. And we saw what happened so far, and that's a small outlook just for this year, and there's even way more if we look ahead at the next decade. There are more and more regulations and laws coming. So what was implemented at the beginning of the year is the Electricity Market Design Directive. Again, offers you more contract choices and transparent information for you to make the right decision at the energy market. Allows you or expands on the dynamic pricing option. So what I just saw with the hourly price can even become more real-time, and enables you to better participate. Further supports the peer-to-peer energy trading, so that you can sell your bought energy directly to another person, to another entity in the market, without going through the whole process of the energy grid. Not specifically for the energy market, but it will have an impact, is the European Union AI Act. So that also allows an AI-based solution, or AI-driven energy management system, further improving the already existing energy management system, is maybe simplifying or easing up the models I just showed. So by introducing AI as a supporting technology here. And the Energy Efficiency Directive also should implement it by the mid of this year, is providing a target for the European Union to reduce actually the energy consumption. As I showed in the beginning, energy consumption is rising, and that's a target to reduce the energy in some sectors by almost 12% by 2030, and also having a ramp up. So every year there must be a few percentage of lower energy consumption. And also quite nice implements an efficiency first principles for all member states, so that new laws and decisions on investments always needs to be made with the mindset, is that efficient? And that always needs to be considered first, is that an efficient investment or an efficient law we are doing here, or we want to implement?
I'm gonna stop you there, Robin.
Yes, I'm
I'm
way
gonna-
over my time, I saw already.
I'm gonna. I think there's. Thank you very much. There's a lot of information to absorb. I think if anybody has got any questions, is anybody working on in their company on their energy management plans, or are you working within the investment sphere so that you need to know about this area? It would be interesting to know, because the purpose of our discussions today is to give as much information to those working in net zero or needs to essentially manage their pricing, their if you're an investor, if you're, as mentioned by Fayaz, if you're starting to look at e-fuels production, all of this, there's so many factors now coming together. That's Sky Power that Robin mentioned. There is, I just want to show one thing which is relevant to, sorry to interrupt Robin, but I just want to show a couple of things before the end of the hour. With regards to the grid, there is currently in the UK, if any producers, any new project developers want to start building, whether it's e-fuels, other net zero projects, sustainable aviation fuel, there is now a waiting list to get access to a grid connection, and that waiting list goes into the 2030s. So I think what we want to do is give definite signals to and indicators to those working in net zero that these projects and these kind of this thinking needs to be embedded. So I think what Robin has presented today is a really good overview of what you need to know about the electricity market, how to essentially, I guess it's, prevent the risk, to manage it. A lot, as is clearly discussed, there's a lot of in renewables. Everyone is saying, yes, it may be cheaper than fossil, it may be cheaper than nuclear, but is it reliable? Can you manage it? As we've seen, the prices are going up and down. That's a risk to a business. Demand is going up and down. As Robin said, even there is waste of renewables. So how do you embed that into your strategies? How do you embed it into your outlooks? Maybe you are looking for final investment decision and you need to know this information in detail. I haven't got any questions, but has anybody got any comments on this today? I'll just skip back to, so what what I wanted to also discuss is that Flywheel Alliance and myself, we've been supporting the proposal of a hybrid energy system because we're aware of all of these topics. So I presented at the UK's National Nuclear Laboratory last week, and we were again discussing the grid, its capacity, how it needs to expand. We were talking about different kinds of virtual power plants, which essentially, so Robin's talked about certain versions. We were also looking at small modular reactors, nuclear power, and how this all fits into a hybrid system. So we're not trying to play off each approach with each other, but it's really about how do you embed and invest in them all. So we've got a diagram that UK NNL has kindly offered us, shown us. Oh yeah, this is how many terawatts the UK uses. So this is the hybrid system. So this is essentially UK NNL and most national and EU energy developers are working to make sure that this system is using all net zero decarbonized energy approaches. It's not one or the other, it's all of them. So we are really working to embed all of this, and that's definitely some of our thought leadership and what we have been doing at Flywheel Alliance and in the Loop. It's how do we bring these topics, such as Robin's discussed today, such as Fayaz has discussed. We are looking at all of these market factors, how to analyze it, how to look at it. What might also be a surprise with regards to energy, well, actually, this is the UK Prime Minister, I guess in response to Donald Trump, who said build, baby, build, rather than drill, baby, drill, and that is regards to nuclear and those power plants. But what is interesting is that actually the Trump administration is pro-nuclear. So if people are starting to think about SAF investments, e-fuel investments, then actually, even though there is some political risk around what Fayaz was mentioning today, then actually having this hybrid approach where we consider what Robin has said, which is the EU market, but and how to manage the grids, how to be smart about it, but then how do you add extra virtual power plants or extra sources of energy to achieve your net zero outcomes, to reduce your cost per megawatt hour, to really make sure that the EU and other countries are meeting the net zero target. So I wanted to just kind of quickly say this at the end. Thank you. It's now, I know it's now 1 minute over, but I wanted to kind of just wrap up and demonstrate that what we are also doing within the loop is this integrate, like I've mentioned on this slide. It's how do we integrate everything? How do we put everything in context and then facilitate these conversations? So it really is about bringing all these different sectors, but of course, energy and net zero is the common denominator. And we want to make sure we are giving all our those that attend and our members as much information as we can to make their jobs easier and to be smart about everything. So appreciate your time, and you've given us so much information today, Robin. No worries about timing. We can talk fast. Thank you to everybody. Has anybody got any questions? Feel free to. But if not, thank you very much for joining. I will stop recording now. And yeah.